Go ahead.
So the year was 1949, and I was, no, no, the year was, yeah, 1949 by the time we got to this Dr. Lewin, Philip Lewin. And of course, to a little girl like me, I was 13 at the time, he looked old. I was going to be 14. I think maybe I already went to him at 14. I don't know. But, and the surgery was this. First of all, if I didn't have the surgery, I would have died at a young age because my spine was going to push against my lungs, and I wouldn't have, I would eventually be so misshapen that my lungs would not have any capacity. So they put me in a big cast with a turn screw and an open back. And I was in bed. I had to be in bed, and every day, at the hospital already, every day they turned the turn screw so that my back, which was an S at that time, would straighten. And then, after 6 weeks in the hospital, they did the surgery. I don't know how long the surgery took, but they took a bone from my leg, therefore I have a scar all the way down my leg, and they fused it with my spine. Then I was in the hospital for about another 6 weeks because I developed a nervous stomach and I couldn't keep food down. That was another problem. But then I went home and I was in a hospital bed for another 6 months maybe. And my girlfriend Francine, who lived, no, we had already moved, so we didn't live across the alley. But she would bring me work, and I had a teacher who came to the house, and I passed 4 subjects because I missed school. I was in, I guess, 10th grade. I missed the whole, almost 3/4 of the year. And whatever I missed, and I was able to keep up with my class except for math and another subject, or maybe it was just math. And in summer school that summer I took the math, and then the next year I was up with my class, but I missed all that school. And as I said, we had a home teacher, Mrs. Fitzgerald. She had been a gym teacher. She became a home teacher.
I find it interesting that your mom, who I always remember as being very passive and not particularly assertive, was able to do all of this stuff for you and schlep you around and think so progressively that you actually had this done.
My mother, it's interesting, my mother always said, my mother was an uneducated woman, always said that you can be book smart to the nth degree, although she didn't use that language, but she said book smart isn't important unless you have seichel. And seichel is a Yiddish word for common sense. And I always remember that because I know people to this day who have degrees and they have very little common sense. And in life, I mean, today, this was going back to 1949. I had my surgery on December 7th of 1949, the day the war broke out, December 7th of 49. And, but she always said that you needed common sense in your life. Book learning was not enough because, so I think if my mother had been born a little later and had born in this country, I think she would have been a very smart lady. She was very good in business. Even she helped with my father's business, and she was very good. And my father, who showed very little emotion, one time when I needed a blood transfusion, the resident on duty, it was the evening, couldn't find a vein, and he said, you call Dr. So-and-so. It was a doctor who was a resident, but he wasn't on duty. He was Southern, he had a Southern accent, he was Jewish. And my father he came and he found a vein like that, and my father gave him $20. I'll never forget that. I saw my father. That was a lot of money, $20 in 1949, 50. It was probably 1950.
So, was your dad attentive to you while you were having all this stuff going on?
No, not so much. You know, my father was, you know, always working, and it was my mother, and, you know, she had to take 2 buses to come to Michael Reese Hospital to come to see me. And then I went home. I had a hospital bed at home, and then I had, for the next year, I think, I wore a brace. After they took the cast off, I had to wear a brace. I was always excused from PE. MDX, they called it, medical excuse.
And what about your sisters? How did they react to all the attention you were getting?
Well, you know, Anita was married.
Oh, already?
Anita got married in August of 1949. So she was married.
And living in Los Angeles already?
No. She lived not too far from where we lived. And Merle wasn't born because Manny was in medical school. I think my mother had a falling out with Manny for a while.
Really? What's that about?
I don't know. I just know that they didn't speak for a while, but then. And Eunice did not know Lenny yet. But Eunice was always going out, and Eunice went to modeling school, and, you know, Eunice was pretty, and Eunice had red hair, and Eunice got a lot more attention than either Anita or I got. But, I mean, my mother knew what to do, that's all. And I'm very fortunate, although my whole life I've had a problem with my back as far as how it looks. I never wear anything tight. No tight t-shirts, if you've ever noticed. I've never worn tight t-shirts.
Because of your back?
Yes, because I have a misshapen back, and it has always bothered me because my mother, I think, always wanted me to look nice and not have it show, because by the time they did surgery on me, they still couldn't make it completely straight. On the other hand, my niece Merle, when she was 13, she had scoliosis also, but they found it so quickly. And Merle at 13, if she was 52, 62, 65, so about 15 or 16 years after my surgery, the difference was that Merle went in, had the surgery, had a bone bank from a bone
Oh, the same
bank.
type of surgery still.
She had a fusion. They opened up a smaller part of her back. Now, maybe hers wasn't as serious as mine, but they were able to use a bone from a bone bank, and she was in the hospital for 10 days and up walking. And she had to wear a brace as well afterwards, but nothing like I had to do.
So you had mentioned that this was the 5th surgery that this particular surgeon had done. Was it common yet in the United States, or was he like the only person doing it? Do you know?
I don't know about in the United States. I don't know, but he was doing it to one other person at the same time. I shared a room with her.
Really?
She was in the hospital. Can't remember her name.
Roughly the same age?
Roughly the same age as I was. And I don't know if he did hers before. I only knew her for a couple of days, so I think maybe she was already done when I got there, because I was in the hospital for 9 weeks.
That's a long time to be in the hospital.
A long time to be in the hospital when you're 14 years old.
Now, you had mentioned that your mom took you to Iowa City to see this person at the university.
His name was Arthur Steindler. He was a big professor, doctor at the University of Iowa. And he had another method of treatment, a lot of physical therapy and exercise and a big brace at night. But it was still getting worse, because scoliosis will get worse because it's in the growing years. It comes in the growing years. And so that's why you need to, and it is familial. And so you need to check your kids, and most schools now do check kids for scoliosis.
So that's a big
and
thing.
Screening.
That's a big thing to go through when you're in your teenage years.
Yes.
How did that impact your social life and all that kind of stuff?
I don't know. I still went out. I still had dates, later on, and I don't know. I just, it wasn't, psychologically, it didn't. I was, I got through it. It was not anything that I ever had a major issue with. But today, now I'm not quite remembering if Merle had a bone from a bone bank or she had a chip of bone taken from her hip. I know after mine, I heard they took bones from bone bank, and I think maybe Merle had a bone taken from her piece of bone from her hip, but I'm not sure. But now, people still have fusions, but not as much. You don't hear it for scoliosis. You hear it for people who have bulging discs and sciatica and real bad back problems. And sometimes they have a fusion and they take a bone from the hip, chips of bone from the hip. And a doctor told me that bone, part of my back, will be stronger for the rest of my life because it's my own bone.
Well, so I was going to ask, you just had surgery the last, 5 years ago or something?
I had surgery, if you can believe, 2000.
Oh, that long ago.
11 years ago.
And did that surgeon notice anything or make any comments about the previous surgery?
I only went to 7 doctors until I had the surgery, and I was going with it for 2 years almost until I had the surgery, because I don't rush into anything. I asked each of them if it was because of my prior surgery that I had this, and they said that I have a herniated disc, and anyone can get a herniated disc. They don't know. It's lower than where I had my surgery, and so they would never say yes, or they would never say no. And the surgery that I had was they just went in and shaved down the disc and made it all better. I'm very lucky. The reason I waited 2 years and went to 7 doctors is because I didn't want to have surgery. But it got to the point where the pain, which came and went, but most of the time was there. I had a 3-month period after I had the pain for 6 months, and then I had because Jerry and I canceled a trip in February of 1998 to Australia. I was all packed. We were to leave 2 days later, and I couldn't get out of bed, couldn't walk. Luckily, we had insurance. We had a 3-week trip to Australia, New Zealand planned, and I couldn't walk. And so we canceled. And then, that was 1998, we decided to move, and that summer, lo and behold, it went away. I was out of pain for a couple of months. All the time that I moved, I was very careful. All the time that we were getting ready to move, we were packing up, doing things. I didn't do anything physical, but it never came back. Didn't come back for actually 6 months. I came to Philadelphia, to Doylestown, for your installation. Was that not November of 1998?
Yes.
And from Doylestown, we went to Cleveland to a bat mitzvah, Krailman's granddaughter. And in Cleveland, all of a sudden, I felt the pain coming back. And by the time we came home from Cleveland, I was in a wheelchair going down from the airplane. And then, that was November of 98. I went for a year and 4 months, going from doctor to doctor again. Most of them said surgery. I had epidurals. I walked in water. I wore a magnet on my back. I went to the chiropractor and had all kinds of electrical stimulation and massage, deep tissue massage. I went from place to place because the last thing I wanted was surgery.
And then it worked.
And then This doctor, Martin Cooper, one of Jerry's partners, I was talking, just happened to talk to him, and he said, you know, I just had back surgery for that very thing, and Manny had once told me, in talking to Manny, he said, you should only have a neurosurgeon do the surgery. Neurosurgeon is best for spine surgery. And I went, so this guy, Alan Levy, who was a client of Jerry's, told me to go to this Martin Cooper, who actually happened to do brain surgery on Elizabeth Taylor prior. And not that that made any difference. And I went to him, and Marla went with me, and I had made up my mind that I couldn't live the way I was living. So I had the surgery, and my internist said, you know, there's only a 50-50 chance, but Martin Cooper said I wouldn't do the surgery if I didn't think you would get out of pain. And he did, and I did. And then my internist, who did not refer me to Martin Cooper, who really didn't know him, years later, my internist had to have back surgery, and he went to Martin Cooper. So that's the story of my life.
Sounds good.
What kind of cameras?